Good afternoon, everyone. Bonjour, dobry den. Ambassador Kovalev, ministers, President Hichi, dear friends, a warm hello. I'm so happy to be with you this afternoon. And what an honor it is to be here in Winnipeg with you for the Triennial Congress of Ukrainian Canadians. Thank you for inviting me and thank you for welcoming me. C'est un honneur d'être ici avec vous aujourd'hui. Merci beaucoup de me recevoir. And I acknowledge, first and foremost, that we are gathering on Treaty 1 territory, the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dene, Dakota, and the birthplace of the Métis Nation. Today and every day, we reaffirm our commitment to meaningful reconciliation. Canadians and Ukrainians are united by deep historical bonds. In our parliament, in our towns and cities across this great land, Ukrainian Canadians are grieving. They're grieving for their motherland, they're grieving for their families, their friends, their towns and cities. And one of the reasons why I so wanted to come here today was to salute you for being united in our efforts to support Ukraine during these turbulent times. And as the Prime Minister mentioned, Canada and Ukraine aren't just close partners. We are friends. We are friends who share the value of democracy and the value of freedom. And Putin's full-scale, unjustifiable invasion of Ukraine is a direct attack on the same values that bring us here today and that unite us every day. In the face of Putin's unprovoked war on Ukraine, what I have seen is incredible strength and courage and resilience. That is what I know of Ukrainians. That is what I think of when I speak with Ukrainians. That is what it drives me every day to shore up whatever aid we can deliver for Ukraine. Because Ukraine will win this war. And in the process, Ukraine will win this war. And in the process, Canada will continue to provide support in the short, the medium, and the long term for however long it takes. That is the resolve of the Government of Canada. Let me say a word about military equipment. Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine is entering its 9th month. In recent months, we have heard that the armed forces of Ukraine have made remarkable progress, reclaiming Ukrainian territory, pushing back Russian forces in the north, in the east, and in the south. And when I am being briefed, that is the positive that I hear, the gains that Ukrainians are making every day, speaking to that resilience, speaking to that courage, speaking to that bravery. And the armed forces of Ukraine must be commended for this resilience in the battle of their lives. Now, Ukraine has emphasized to its partners, and indeed my friend Minister Reznikov has emphasized to me directly, that these successes were possible through the military equipment and assistance provided by Canada and our allies, and the broader partnership, all in support of a sovereign, secure, and stable Ukraine. Ces récentes victoires sur le champ de bataille témoignent aussi de la force et de l'engagement de l'Ukraine et des Ukrainiens. Canada's defense industry produces high-quality equipment, and as we have seen, they're continuing to step up for Ukraine. We will continue to work to identify more and more aid for Ukraine, and we will move forward in conjunction with industry to get Ukraine the help it needs. Canada is providing significant and comprehensive military support to Ukraine and has done so since the beginning. This includes a commitment of over $600 million in military aid that we've already committed to Ukraine since Putin's further invasion in February. M777 howitzers, artillery ammunition, anti-tank weapon systems, over 60 high-resolution drone cameras, as well as 39 armored combat support vehicles and other commercial pattern vehicles, both of which were brand new, coming right off the line, built right here in Canada, because we want to send the very best equipment to Ukraine in its time of need. And we didn't just send the brand new vehicles, we also made sure to have training and maintenance contracts embedded in the purchase for new vehicles, because we know that these vehicles may be damaged in the course of battle, and we want to be there to support the military when these vehicles need to be repaired. Le plan du Canada a répondu aux besoins de l'Ukraine jusqu'ici, et ce plan est le résultat de notre collaboration directe avec le ministre Reznikov et nos autres partenaires et alliés. And I want to just say on a personal note, Minister Reznikov and I are great friends. We have together been part of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, where approximately 50 countries come together frequently to ensure the commitment and delivery of comprehensive military support to Ukraine. This is a critical forum, and at the contact group meetings in Brussels just a few weeks ago, I announced that Canada would contribute another $50 million in additional aid, including artillery rounds, that's a 155 millimeter artillery, drone cameras, satellite communication services to allow greater communication in times of battle between Ukraine and Europe and North America, and over 500,000 pieces of winter clothing and gear to Ukraine. And today, I am pleased to confirm that we have signed winter gear contracts with 7 companies for various types of gear and equipment, including winter combat boots, winter parkas, winter socks, mill-grade winter gloves, thermal clothing, and more. These deliveries will begin shortly, and they will help to keep Ukrainian soldiers warm when they are fighting for their lives and their sovereignty. Now, that is one of the tranches of support that Canada is giving in the military area. A second line of support is in the delivery of aid. We aren't only delivering our own military equipment to the Ukrainian armed forces, we are also making sure that we help our allies across Europe getting equipment and military aid to Ukraine. In Prestwick, Scotland, we have not 2 but 3 CC-130 Hercules aircrafts We have 55 Canadian Armed Personnel there, making sure that the Allies' aid gets to Ukraine as well. And I will say, when I am at NATO, I frequently have countries around the table coming to thank Canada for this assistance. Norway, Croatia, many other countries, Finland, making sure that they thank the Canadian Armed Forces for the work they do to deliver military aid. Et ces capacités accrues ont renforcé la capacité du Canada et celle de nos alliés et nos partenaires à transporter à l'aide militaire et à fournir à l'Ukraine l'aide dont elle a besoin quand elle en a besoin. Now, the third track of support is in the area of Operation Unifier and training. Canada's expertise here is universally recognized. Whether it is Jens Stoltenberg, Minister Reznikov, or other NATO partners and allies, Canada's contribution in the area of training, especially under Operation Unifier, is universally recognized. À la suite de l'invasion de la Crimée par la Russie, le Canada a lancé l'opération unifiée et cette opération a vu les forces armées canadiennes former leurs homologues ukrainiens pour les aider à améliorer leur efficacité opérationnelle. These numbers are perhaps numbers that you know, but they bear repeating. The Canadian Armed Forces have trained over 33,000 Ukrainian troops, including 2,000 members of the Ukrainian National Guard. And we will continue to make sure that we support Ukraine in its time of need in the area of training. For example, right now, Canadian Armed Forces are training new Ukrainian recruits in the United Kingdom as we speak. Thousands and thousands of young Ukrainians coming to England to be trained to go back to the battlefield, and Canadian Armed Forces members are right there helping, ensuring that this training occurs. All under Operation Unifier. And also, Canadian Armed Forces combat engineers have arrived in Poland to train Ukrainian sappers. And these highly trained combat engineers are going to equip Ukrainian forces with engineer reconnaissance, the use of explosives for demolition work, and demining training to enhance Ukraine's technological capabilities on the ground. Et nos forces armées canadiennes ont également formé les forces ukrainiennes à l'utilisation des obusiers M767 que nous avons donnés à l'Ukraine plus tôt cette année. And at the heart of all of this is the work of our dedicated Canadian Armed Forces. Whether it is the Air Force pilots who have been transporting aid bound for Ukraine, or the Canadian Armed Force personnel training their Ukrainian counterparts, the work of our military is absolutely extraordinary, and we salute every single one of them. My friends, military support is one of the many elements of our efforts to support Ukraine. Mes amis, le soutien militaire représente seulement un élément parmi plusieurs en ce qui concerne nos efforts pour soutenir l'Ukraine. And as Prime Minister Trudeau mentioned, we have imposed severe sanctions on Putin and his enablers. We've expanded our humanitarian efforts to help Ukrainians, and we've welcomed with open arms over 100,000 Ukrainians to Canada as well. Notre gouvernement fédéral, nos partenaires provinciaux, l'industrie canadienne et d'importantes organisations comme le Congrès, ici, travaillent ensemble pour aider les personnes dans le besoin. And at this moment, I would like to take a moment to thank the UCC and its members in helping to coordinate shelter for displaced Ukrainians right across the country. I have visited Ukrainian churches and community centers across Canada, from London to Victoria, and your service is nothing short of inspirational. Thank you. I have met with families who are hosting Ukrainians. I have met with businesses who are hiring Ukrainians. I have met with churches and neighbors and friends and support groups, and everywhere the message is the same. We stand with you. We will be with you for the short and the long term. We love you and we are here for you. So to conclude, to those who are here today, and it's fantastic to see so many people in this room, to those who are watching at home, to Joan, to Alexandra, to Yulia, to Oleksii, to all our Ukrainian friends, the bottom line is that this isn't a fleeting moment of attention for the Government of Canada. In fact, at the end of January, I was in Kyiv about 3 weeks before the further invasion, and I met with Minister Reznikov, other Ukrainian government officials, and some of our Canadian Armed Forces personnel deployed there as part of Operation Unifier. And most importantly, I met with the Ukrainian people, and I saw firsthand the immeasurable strength and the courage that so many of us see now. I saw kids stand shoulder to shoulder with their parents. Parents stopped me in the street to tell me how much it meant for them to have Canada by their side. And when they saw that I was standing with Canadian Armed Forces personnel with a Canadian flag on their shoulder, they saw more than a partner. They saw a trustworthy friend that embodies the values of peace and freedom and democracy. Lorsque les Ukrainiens voient la feuille d'érable sur l'épaule d'un soldat, ils voient plus qu'un partenaire, ils voient un ami digne de confiance qui incarne les valeurs de paix, de liberté et de démocratie. Oleksii, Yulia, Alexandra, Canada stands with Ukraine as it defends its sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence. And we will continue to do so, because this isn't just about Ukraine. It's about the values that we hold dear to our hearts: freedom, peace, and democracy. And we are with you, and we are with Ukraine as this illegal and unjustifiable further invasion continues. I want to thank you for being here today. I want to thank Minister Reznikov, Ambassador Kovalev, the UCC, and all of you. Slava Ukraini! Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Slava Ukraini. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Now it gives me a great honor and privilege to introduce my dear friend Oleksii Reznikov, who will be joining us by video. And I will say there's something special about Minister Reznikov. In the heat of the battle, in the most difficult moments, that Ukraine has seen militarily, he is always smiling. He is always confident. He is always strong. And he always has a hug for everyone. Without further ado, Minister Reznikov by video. Thank you.
Шановна пані Лесю, Dear Anita, шановна громада, маю велику честь та приємність вітати делегатів 27-го трирічного Конгресу українців Канади. Перш за все, хочу подякувати уряду Канади та прем'єр-міністру Джастіну Трюдо і її народу, а також усім українцям за підтримку та надану військову допомогу у найскладніший момент після відновлення незалежності України. З 1991 року Канада є одним з найбільших друзів України у світі. Величезна роль у цьому саме української громади. Ви є впливовою силою і взірцем для громад інших держав. Сьогодні Україна та український народ опинилися в умовах найстрашнішої війни на теренах Європи з часів Другої світової. Ця війна за наше виживання як нації і держави у битві проти віковічного ворога. Українські міста та громади щоденно зазнають обстрілів крилатими та балістичними ракетами, іранськими дронами, дронами камікадзе, артилерією. За останній тиждень усі удари були виключно по цивільній інфраструктурі. Це така тактика терористів. Саме тому Україна закликає визнати російський режим терористичним. Також ми на усіх рівнях підкреслюємо необхідність захистити наше небо. Щоб попередити масштабну гуманітарну кризу, яка вдарить по всій Європі. Зараз російські війська намагаються знищити нашу енергетичну систему. Їх мета – залякати українців та схилити до думки про капітуляцію. Ворог не дотримується жодних принципів моралі та норм міжнародного права. Підтвердженням цього є докази воєнних злочинів у всіх містах, які наші воїни звільнили від окупантів. Бучі, Ірпіні, Ізюмі, Лимані та інших містах та селищах. Проте український народ і нашу армію не зламати. Ми даємо відсіч агресії вже 246 днів. Хоча у лютому багато хто вважав, що Київ впаде за 3 дні. З початку вересня ми звільнили понад 11 тисяч квадратних кілометрів окупованої росіянами території та понад 500 населених пунктів. І наші воїни не зупиняються. Наші успіхи на полі бою були б неможливі без підтримки світової спільноти. Українці у різних країнах роблять вагомий внесок у справу відновлення міжнародного порядку. У прийнятті рішень урядами країн для підтримки і відстоювання демократичних цінностей для боротьби з тоталітаризмом, який уособлює в собі нинішній російський режим та його спільники з інших диктатур. Я щиро вдячний українській громаді Канади, президенту Конгресу українців Канади, а також осередкам Конгресу по всім регіонам за підтримку і відстоювання українських інтересів. Окремо хочу подякувати активістам, волонтерам, які збирають різноманітну допомогу. А також канадським українцям та канадцям, які долучились до оборони нашої держави в складі українських бойових підрозділів. Хочу висловити слова вдячності моїй колезі, міністру Аніті Ананд, за особисті зусилля для підтримки України. Під час останньої зустрічі з пані міністром у Брюсселі ми обговорювали низку нових проєктів, які мають зміцнити оборону України. Працюємо над їх втіленням. Позиція Канади є послідовною протягом багатьох років. Це дії справжніх надійних друзів. Йдеться не тільки про зброю. У рамках програми Unifier канадськими інструкторами було підготовлено понад 33 тисячі військовослужбовців Збройних сил України та Національної гвардії України. Наші воїни отримали гідний рівень бойового вишколу, володіння озброєнням і військовою технікою, знаннями та умінням в організації спротиву ворогу. Дуже важливим є функціонування групи радників з реформування оборонної сфери України Defense Reforms Advisory Board. Хочу подякувати особисто пані Jill Sinclair, яка є модератором панельної дискусії Canada and Ukraine Working Together to Build Euro-Atlantic Security. Зараз канадські фахівці тренують наших військових у рамках британської місії Interflex UK. У першу чергу йдеться про опанування техніки, та канадського озброєння, гаубиць, бойових броньованих машин тощо, які ми отримали у вигляді допомоги. Важливо є мовна та фахова підготовка особливого складу Збройних сил України на курсах програми військової підготовки та співробітництва Міністерства національної оборони Канади. Я вдячний особисто полковнику Марселю Макніколу, який очолює ще один важливий напрямок підтримки України, а саме групу координації надання допомоги Україні – Military Aid Coordination Cell при Міністерстві національної оборони Канади. Усе це суттєвий внесок у нашу спільну перемогу над агресором, у відновлення миру та стабільності в Європі, а також поваги до міжнародного права та міжнародних інституцій. Я закликаю українську громаду у Канаді продовжувати наполегливу працю для підтримки України у цей визначальний для нашої історії час. Я впевнений, що з цих випробувань ми вийдемо більш сильними і загартованими. Ми звільнимо усю нашу землю, включаючи і Крим, і Донбас. Ми збудуємо Україну, якою би пишалися усі наші герої, хто боровся за її волю та незалежність на різних етапах, де будуть щасливі живі, сучасні покоління і де втілять свої мрії ще не народжені. Я вірю, що уряд Канади та канадський народ будуть поряд з нами у цій боротьбі до повної перемоги над російським агресором. Наша перемога зробить світ більш справедливим та безпечним. Thank you. I know that our victory, joint victory over the aggressor is inevitable. Слава Україні!
We good to go here? Jill?
We're good to go.
You're good. Go ahead.
Minister, thank you so much. And thanks to Alexandra and Ihor, Ambassador Kovalev. Minister Anand, I'm so sorry I can't be with you actually, but I am with you very much in spirit, as we are all with Ukraine in spirit. And we just have to thank Minister Reznikov for having taken the time to make that video. We know exactly how difficult his days are. Thank you so much. Look, I'm amongst the most privileged who've been working with Ukraine for the last 6 years in this journey, on the transatlantic journey to become part of the Euro-Atlantic family. And I'm so pleased to be able to have an opportunity, Minister, to just ask you a few questions about how we can help Ukraine. We know the war, this is the existential fight, and Ukraine will win this. We've heard it. We've heard it from Ukrainians, from you, from the Deputy Prime Minister. There's no question, and we know that Ukrainians are fighting constantly and fearlessly, and that the Ukrainian army, as Minister Reznikov has said, is unbreakable. And you've spoken so powerfully, Minister, about Canada's support and really given us, I think, a good sense of the comprehensiveness of this support. But what I'd like to ask you is, in getting that support to Ukraine, you've talked about your great relationship with Minister Reznikov, who's an extraordinary leader. How do we make sure that we get the right stuff to Ukraine at the right time for the right purpose? Because sometimes people say, well, that's great, Canada's giving this, but how do we know that this is meeting Ukrainian requirements? Can you give us a little bit of an insight into that process? Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jill, of course. And first of all, I'd like to thank you for your incredible contributions in Ukraine and vis-a-vis Unifier. You're doing great work, and we're really lucky to have you. Thank you. I, in answer to your question, wanted to provide the audience and you with some insight as to how the discussion about donations to Ukraine proceeds. And it's really important to recognize that Canada is one of over 50 countries who are part of this defense contact group. And that was formed by the Secretary of Defense of the United States, Lloyd Austin. And we meet very frequently to discuss military needs for Ukraine. Minister Reznikov comes to those meetings. And we
literally go around the table to talk about what each country can donate to Ukraine, keeping in mind the list of Ukraine's needs that is put up on a slide for us all to see. So we are directly responding to a list that comes from Ukraine. And indeed, on my bilateral level and relationship with Oleksii, that's exactly what I do also. So he will tell me precisely what Ukraine needs, and I will do whatever I can to get that material from Canadian inventory or from Canadian industry or from purchasing from allies. Those are the three tracks, basically, that we are utilizing in terms of sourcing equipment. And I will say, just to give you some examples, the winter clothing, a specific request from Minister Reznikov. Yes, they need air defense systems, but they need to survive the winter also, and Canada has expertise in the area of production of winter clothing. So we knew that was a niche area that we could leverage, and that's exactly what we are doing with 500,000 pieces of winter clothing. But even beyond that, there was an urgent need for cameras for drones. Okay, Ukraine had the drones, they needed the drone cameras. We have a company in Canada, L3 Harris, that produces these drone cameras. Well, they had a number of other suppliers, a number of other purchasers lined up before the government of Canada. But Ukraine needed these within days. So we called L3 Harris and simply said, we need these cameras urgently, what can you do for us? And they called their other purchasers and said, look, we got to put you a little further down the line because the government of Canada needs to buy these cameras for supplying them to Ukraine right away. Similarly with the LAVs and the armored vehicles from GDLS, we knew that Ukraine needed brand new vehicles, not vehicles that had been decommissioned from the Canadian Armed Forces. Brand new vehicles with training and maintenance contracts with that delivery. And now, right now, Ukrainians are being trained on the use of those vehicles in a third country. So, Jill, that is the methodology that we're using. It's a direct conversation with Minister Reznikov and with the broader allies and partnership. And I will say it's iterative. That means it's ongoing. So I will continually have conversations with Oleksii about our timelines for procuring and our need to get contracts in place quickly, but also what they need in the short, medium, and long term. And I'll just say to close out that this is not just Canada and Ukraine, right? I spoke with Lloyd Austin this week about potential additional avenues that we can go down to supply Ukraine with additional military equipment. This continues to be all of our attention all of the time, and we won't let up.
Thanks, Minister. I think it's always good for people to hear kind of the inside story a little bit, because we see the tip of the iceberg, but you talked about the enablers that we have in Prestwick, the Canadian Armed Forces personnel, the HERCs, and everything that goes into getting that kit on time to the Ukrainians as they require it. And I know that this lashing up of requirements from Ukraine and what Canada can offer, you've really laid that out very, very clearly. My sense is that it's a real partnership, and as you say, it's iterative. And so I'd like to ask you again a little bit on this burden sharing piece. And I know it's hard to talk about what goes on around international tables, but you were in Brussels very recently. Minister Reznikov was there too. The U.S. is chairing this, the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, as you described. Can you give us any sense as to, how that burden sharing discussion is going, not just for the sort of the really urgent, immediate needs, but also taking into account the sort of the new depths of barbarity that we're seeing with the introduction of Iranian drones and new technology that is creating such terror and havoc in Ukraine. I use the word terror not terrorizing people, of course, because they are even more resilient and committed. But can you tell me how those discussions internationally, they roll out a little bit, and where Canada's leadership is playing into that effort too?
Most definitely, Jill. So my very first NATO meeting after the further invasion on February 24th was monumental because every single NATO ally committed to condemning the Russian further invasion and unprovoked and unjustifiable attack on Ukraine. So there was complete unanimity around the NATO table right away. And that unanimity has continued. The way in which I try to be effective, which I think might be useful to hear about around the table, is to take a very deep look at what Ukraine is asking for, and then to immediately address what Canada can provide with my team back home. So I always make sure that I have the leadership of the defense team with me, or people from that table around the conference table in NATO in Brussels and the Defense Contact Group, because it has to be immediate. And we need to act very quickly. And I'll give you an example of I would say, the efficacy of that type of conferencing, if you will. In Budget 2022, our government put $500 million on the table for military aid to Ukraine. That was unprecedented in terms of a federal budget. But many people said, you're not going to be able to spend that $500 million because procurement is so slow. But that's not what happened, Jill. What we did is we immediately began purchasing and spent that $500 million within months. Why? Because this is the fight of everyone's life. And we bought the cameras for drones. We bought 8 Rochelle Senators that Minister Reznikov referred to. We bought the 39 LAVs with training and maintenance contracts. We bought ammunition for the M777s. That's what we're doing. We're acting with rapidity. And we will keep going with this model of decision-making, interacting with our allies and partners at an international level, at the Defense Contact Group, and at NATO, and then immediately getting to work back home. That's kind of my strategy. And at all times, I stay in close contact with Minister Reznikov in case their needs change or in case Canada can be more effective. And I'll just say that the allies are very much united in this, and Canada is particularly close with the United States and the United Kingdom in terms of what we can do together. And the training in the UK is just one example, but there will continue to be others as we maintain our resolve to assist Ukraine in its time of need.
Thanks, Minister. I think I have time for just one more question to you. And what I'd like to do, I mean, you've talked about the immediate, you've talked about the fact that Canada will provide support for however long it takes. And I think we all take great comfort in knowing that Canada is going to be there. And I know the Ukrainians I work with feel that every single day, from the level of the training to the level of the provision of kit. I'd like to ask you sort of a question that goes a little bit to the future, because we heard from the Deputy Prime Minister, we heard from Minister Reznikov, he was asking about language training, for example. Ukraine is extraordinary in fighting for its very existence, and at the same time, keeping the machinery of government working and thinking forward, as they always do. So I'd like to ask you to think forward a little bit about ongoing partnership with Ukraine on its Euro-Atlantic journey. We know Ukraine has applied to NATO, thanks in large part to Canada's effort Ukraine is an enhanced opportunity partner with NATO. And we know, and you've mentioned this before Russia launched its second invasion of Ukraine, Ukraine was a living laboratory for every heinous piece of war weaponry and tactic that Russia had. Ukraine wants to share this with us. Ukraine has extraordinary expertise and insights. Can you tell us anything about what this war is teaching us in terms of future security challenges, hybrid, asymmetric, disinformation, all the stuff we see? And, how can we work together with Ukraine as a true partnership? Because it is Ukraine that has the agency, it has the experience, and Ukraine wants to integrate fully into the Euro-Atlantic family, as we know.
Most definitely. Let me just say that it's important to recognize that 33,000 number of Ukrainian soldiers trained by the Canadian Armed Forces personnel. Sometimes I have to catch myself because I say it so often. I have to say to myself, slow down, Anita, because it's 33,000 people and 2,000 members of the Ukrainian National Guard, and Canada was there in 2015, not 2022, with Ukraine. In 2015. And that's how we built up that relationship, that very strong relationship between the Canadian Armed Forces and between the Ukrainian Armed Forces. And I know the relationship is strong, not just because I've been to Kyiv or because I'm in this position at the current time, but one of our lieutenant colonels, Melanie Lake, has offered a very strong window into that relationship. And what she said is, look, it's not just Canadians teaching Ukrainians. The Ukrainians are teaching us. The Ukrainians are teaching us about camouflage techniques. They're teaching us about battlefield techniques. They are making sure that we learn from them, and it's a reciprocal relationship. Right at the very heart of Operation Unifier, there is a reciprocal Canadian-Ukrainian relationship that we must never lose sight of. And it's true. And I know you mentioned looking to the future. And I think that's really important because we are so focused on the here and now. What does Ukraine need militarily here and now? But we also have to be thinking about the coming months and years in terms of our support. And what we know is that Russia's illegal further invasion and war crimes have changed the rules-based international order. They have changed the threat environment, and therefore they have changed how we must respond from a policy perspective to this changing threat environment, where global powers are seeking to gain new ground, be it Russia or China. And in our defense policy update that we are undertaking now, we will be responding to this changing global environment as a result of greater aggression, especially by Russia and Putin. And what does that mean for Canada's defense policy? So on top of strong, secure, engaged, which is our defense policy in place since 2017, we are completing this defense policy update, which will be issued in the coming months. And we will respond to cyber security threats. We will respond to the changing strategic environment and the need to ensure that our continent as well is protected, including in the Arctic, which we began to ensure is protected many decades ago with NORAD, over 5 decades ago, but also with our NORAD modernization project, which I announced, of almost $40 billion over 20 years. So this, again, this isn't static. We're in a time of war and changing global strategic interests, and Canada's responding. We're responding, of course, militarily to meet Ukraine's needs together with our allies, and we are responding to ensure the protection of the North American continent as well. Thank you.
Minister, thanks. And I promised your staff that I will get you out on time. So I'm going to wrap up this conversation here by saying that Ukraine is teaching us so much, not just on the battlefield, but what it means to be a resilient people, to be a resilient culture, a resilient society. And Ukraine is teaching us about democracy and what it means to fight for our values with the support of friends. And you've explained so well Canada's support in that regard. So I want to thank you so much for being part of this relationship of trust that we have with Ukraine, and for reassuring us all that we're going to be there with Ukraine now and into the future. I have to close by thanking the Ukrainian Credit Union Limited for having sponsored this session so we could have this conversation with you, and thank you for letting me join you from afar. Дякую вам.
Jill, thank you so much to you, and I look forward to meeting you on the ground very soon. Thanks for all you do as well, and thanks everybody. Slava Ukraini.
Slava Ukraini.